All right, boys and girls, on this video, we're going to look at two, I think, really important skills for you, especially this year in the upcoming years when you get into 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. You're going to use this quite a bit, and that is known as LCM or LCD. LCM stands for least common multiple, or LCD stands for least common denominator. I know in my class, I probably talk more about LCD versus LCM, and it's because of how we use it. But really, they are the same thing. The math that's behind it it's really the same thing. So I just thought I'd mention both of them. Although I think when I make this video, you're going to probably hear me say LCD more. So let's talk about how to find LCM or LCD when you're looking at two fractions. So again, one of the big skills that we're going to be getting into is adding and subtracting with unlike denominators. And so your first step when you are solving these is you have to come up with a common denominator. It's like when you add or subtract fractions in math, you have to have common denominators. You can't add, a common mistake here or misconception would be when kids look at this problem, they think, oh, well, I can just go add the denominators here. I could do 3 plus 5 and it would be eighths. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And, last year in 4th grade, when you guys were looking at starting to add and subtract fractions and using fraction tiles, that was the one thing that was really easy for you because you always had common denominators. So you would have been adding, eighths to eighths, or you would have been adding fifths to fifths. Well, in 5th grade, that changes because now we're taking something like this problem where we're taking a third, 1/3, and we're adding 1/5. Well, this particular video, I'm just going to be covering really the first step of that, which is finding the LCM or the LCD, so the least common multiple or the least common denominator. Okay, it's really easy. It's not hard at all, and it's especially easy if you know your multiplication facts. So let's talk about how this might look. So if you were to do this problem, 1/3 plus 1/5, your first step would be finding the LCD. So how I show my students to do this is just to pull out the denominator. So I'm going to pull out a 3, and then after that, I'm going to pull out a 5, and then I'm just going to put a colon beside it because really what I'm doing here is I'm going to be making a list. And I think what gets kids is this next part. So really watch what I'm doing here. When I'm making a list here, I am listing all my facts of 3 and all my facts of 5. I'm not listing factors. I think this is probably one of the biggest issues kids run into because they're going to go back to what we did before Christmas break and they're going to go, oh, okay, this is kind of like factoring. There's some similarities because they involve multiplication, but when you're finding the least common denominator, you're not thinking about what times what gives you 3 or what times what gives you 5. You're thinking about just listing out your facts. So now you're thinking of your multiples. So really that's where it comes in where you hear LCM or least common multiple because you are listing your multiples here. So for 3, I would write 3 because 3 times 1 is 3. And then I would just start listing some of them. And what I usually do with my students is I say, okay, go list the first 3. So I'm going to list 3, 6, 9. So I just want to pause here and I want to see what's going to happen. I want to go to my 5 and I want to list 5, 10, and then 15. And so at that point, I would kind of stop and go, okay, well, what do I have so far? I've got 3, 6, 9, I've got 5, 10, 15. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for a number that's the same on both lists. So if I look at what I have right now, I don't have it because I don't see a common number on both lists. But what I could think about happening here, this is really where the kids that know their multiplication facts are going to be more successful than others that don't. Kids are probably going to go, well, I know one that's going to show up on both lists. It's just not there yet. And that's because if I kept writing my 3's, my next one would be 12, but then the one after that would be 15. And so now I have a common number on both lists, or I have found what's known as the least common multiple or the least common denominator. And in that case, it's 15. So that's a really easy skill as long as you know your multiplication facts. If you don't know your multiplication facts, you're going to be in trouble here. You're not going to be as successful as some of your classmates that do know them. So let's practice it again. All right, on this particular page, I have a denominator of 6 and I have a denominator of 8. So I'm going to pull those two out. And as I pull them out, I'm just going to write my facts. Not my factors, but my facts. So 6 times 1 is 6, times 2 is 12, times 3 is 18. I'm just going to write the first 3. Times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24. All right, so I look at my list and I think, okay, well, I don't have any common ones yet. But if I kept some of my lists going, I think I could. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to continue with 6 and watch what happens. My next fact of 6 is 6 times 4, which is 24, and that shows up on both lists. So least common multiple, least common denominator, it's going to be 24 for these two. All right, last example here. This one I put on just to show that, sometimes, at least in my class, I'm fine with this. You have to check with your teachers. But you know what? To me, if you just know it, why go do all that extra work? And, some kids sometimes, will have a brain fart on this and they'll work harder than what they should. But you know what? To me, you're fifth graders and you should know your multiplication facts. And like I'm sitting here looking at these two, a 10 and a 5. Man, this should be easy. It's almost like if a kid just knew, hey, the LCM or the LCD for these two would be 10. I would be fine with that if they knew it. And I would promote that because I think that that's something that your teachers in the future are going to want you to do. They're going to want to see you get the least common multiple or the least common denominator pretty quickly. And so if you see that and you don't have to show your work, I think that's in a way a good thing. Now, for those that aren't ready for it, I'm going to show it again just to show you what it could look like. So if I wrote my first 3 for 10, it would be 10 times 1, 10, times 2 is 20, times 3 is 30. But for my 5s, it's going to show up pretty quick. After I write my second fact of 5, there it is. My least common multiple or my least common denominator is 10. And so this is what we're going to, think of it like this. This is our first step that we're going to work on when we add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. So we're just kind of getting this skill out of the way. And hopefully when this skill's done, the rest of it won't be too bad.